So super excited to be interviewing a local counselor here in Colorado Springs. I'd love for you to just kind of start with your professional introduction, and
Sure.
then I'll dig a little deeper.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, let's dig. My name's Carlos Viefon. I'm a LPC, approved clinical supervisor. I'm a PsyD candidate. I'm knee deep into my ADP, and so hopefully wrapping that up here pretty soon. I've been in practice since 2006 here in Colorado Springs in different kind of modalities and forums. I started off in community mental health, doing home-based services, MST specifically, multi-systemic therapy, with some pretty tough clientele. Did that for a few years. That's kind of where I got my bread and butter. And
at Aspen Point?
At Chins Up.
Oh.
Griffith Centers.
Oh, Griffith Centers.
Griffith Centers, Chins Up, and then they kind of merged. But before the merger, it was Chins Up, Youth and Family Services. And so I worked with them, with Ken Lingo. He's an old mentor of mine, so I wanted to shout him out a little bit. So did that for a while, in the homes, tough cases, probation, and DHS, and that sort of a thing. And ultimately found my passion in trauma work. Wanted to kind of individualize myself and, look at the needs of the community, and started asking myself, what do I get myself into to help that population? I'm a veteran myself, a military veteran, U.S. Army, and so I have a lot of military clientele, and during that time, soldiers were coming back from the wars. And on and on and on, they were coming from the war, from their tours. And so I thought about EMDR. I know the EMDR is very popular, and it's a very special modality that works for that particular population. But I researched accelerated resolution therapy.
Oh, which something new to talk about.
It came out of EMDR.
Okay.
The founder of ART, or ART, as we call it, came out of EMDR. And so I found that interesting. I researched it. I went and got trained, and I'm a master ART clinician now. And most of my clinicians over there at Renewal Behavioral Health Services are ART trained or EMDR trained. So that's our niche. It's trauma-informed therapy.
That is super exciting for me as a referral source, because that's definitely not what we do, right? Okay. We've dabbled a little bit in brains, body, which kind of talks a little bit about being a branch out of EMDR, but I have actually never heard of ART. So you're going to have to start right there and tell us, what is this? How is it different than EMDR? Because I think everyone has thought about EMDR.
Sure.
Some clinical limitations that I feel like it has is, one, if somebody doesn't have a lot of time to unpack and then reorganize, it actually causes a dysfunction in their life to start EMDR.
Right.
And many people don't want to necessarily relive that trauma.
Yeah. So how is it different? So it came out of ART, out of EMDR. The ART founder, Lainey Rosenzweig, she was an EMDR trained clinician, and she's kind of a free thinker, which is one thing that I really liked and appreciated about her. Kind of thought outside the box, and I think started doing things a little bit differently, found some good results, brought those results to her supervision, and ultimately, they said, that's not really EMDR. She decided, I'm going to do my own research, I'm going to get a team, I'm going to put this thing together. There's a ton of research, a lot of very similar EMDR studies. I think the biggest difference is, and I'm not an EMDR trained clinician, and I hope I'm not speaking incorrectly here, but what I hear a lot about EMDR is the free association of EMDR, and the term that I know as I was researching and coming up in the field was kind of go with that. What's coming up in your brain, whatever it is, go with that. And so I didn't quite understand what that meant. Again, I don't have the training in it. I'm sure they explain it in their trainings, but ART is a little bit more structured, but it allows the client to use their own creativity to find resolution to their stuck negative images, sensations, and symptoms. There's a lot of Gestalt in it. There's a lot of psychodynamic therapy and theory involved in it, of course, CBT. But I like to include choice theory, a lot of existential kind of logo therapy type of stuff in my art sessions, but really allows the client to be the expert of their own resolution.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I talk about that a lot in Mentally Strong. It's like, and that's the title of the podcast, right? Embrace the journey. Like you're on your journey, and what works for one person might not work for you. There's not a specific, but being able to be creative and figuring out, you know, what actually works for you is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with that. I think in my office, you know, of course I have my plaques on the walls, if you will, and all the things that I'm super proud of, but I often point to them and say, look, just because I have these things on the wall doesn't mean I know better. You are the expert of you. You, your brain, your psychology, your soul, your inner self already knows what it wants. We just got to tap into that. So we use a lot of metaphors. We use a lot of alliteration in art. We talk about being very similar to dreams and dream state, and that's the purpose of the bilateral stimulation. And we do most typically the eye movements, not so much or less so the tapping and those type of bilateral stimulations. More the eye movements, and we're trying to mimic REM. We're trying to mimic dream state so that their own creativity can find some resolution to what's going on with them. Yeah, so we might have an idea as the expert as to what needs to happen, right, and what direction we need to take this client because we're so knowledgeable, but ultimately the client figures it out and they come to their own conclusions. And that's what I like about it. It takes the pressure off of me as a therapist.
Right, and it probably drew you to it as just an individual, embracing your own journey.
Well, absolutely.
Anything you're willing to share about yourself and your own mental health journey?
Yeah, so, wow.
I didn't warn you, did I?
No, you didn't. It's a little therapy session here. I've talked about this plenty, of course, in my professional career and my journey, and as a teacher of newer counselors and whatnot. But, my journey started a long, long time ago. I know grief is a major theme in what you do here and in your story, and I am trained in the grief recovery method. It's something that I found very, very interesting along my way, and in that grief is about loss, not just exclusively death, right? It's about loss and losing relationships, and it could be as simple as my relationship with my car after I get in a car wreck, to of course a profound death of a very close loved one. So with that theme of loss, I guess I was a prodigy type of a kid. I don't know, that sounds kind of self-absorbed, but I got skipped grades when I was a little kid, from the 2nd grade to the 4th grade, and ultimately ended up graduating high school very early. And as I went on my therapeutic journey, I realized that was a loss for me to grieve. That in the 2nd grade, I was the little stud kid, right, that everybody went to for questions and help and guidance, because I was a little ahead of the game, and they plucked me from that and they put me over here with the big kids. And that was traumatic. I found solace in that they put me in the same grade as my older brother. So I went beelined it straight to my brother, and he took care of me for a lot of years. But again, when I graduated high school, I was 15 years old, and what is a kid of 15 years to do? No more school. I'm not required to be in school anymore. I grew up in Los Angeles, the inner city, and so the street life kind of caught up to me, and so I grieved that losing my innocence and seeing what I saw and out there in the streets, and Ultimately, I joined the military at 17 years old. Again, I needed my mom to sign off on me.
Me too.
Yeah. So, that was another loss to grieve, leaving everything I knew, my little neighborhood and all the things that I was getting involved with, and getting plucked and thrown into this environment with a bunch of giant gorillas screaming and yelling at me, right? So grieving that, I think, was something that was eye-opening for me as well. Getting deployed, and on and on and on. Ultimately, I once thought I would be a probation officer, helping juvenile delinquents. I wonder why.
We have a similar path because I worked in the juvenile prisons as well.
Yeah. So, I wasn't a probation officer, but I did work with probation and those type of kids, and I loved it. I found a passion in that. And here in Colorado Springs in the early 2000s, working with the gang-involved kids, and that's kind of how my name became known here in this town, and I was grateful for that. But I did a lot of traveling. I was driving all around this state. From a typical day of mine was leaving Colorado Springs, going to Boulder. You go into a couple court hearings there and seeing a couple clients, and then driving to Elizabeth, Colorado, maybe down to Trinidad, Colorado, up to Pueblo, and then ultimately 9 o'clock back to Colorado Springs to see another couple more clients. And I did that for years and years and years, and I got tired of that, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So again, that's where everything kind of pointed to trauma work. And so now I just operate I operate a outpatient mental health clinic, and it's been growing, and I've been blessed in that way. I have some great clinicians that have similar passion. We're very heavily Medicaid.
You take insurance.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah. And the underserved is a passion of ours, of mine, and I think my team likewise. There's a struggle with Medicaid patients and that bureaucracy and whatnot, but I will never get rid of that.
Yeah, me too.
Of course, soldiers, Fort Carson and dependents and Peterson and everything else in between. We've been in Operation Mind Renewal since 2013. We've relocated. We're down south over by Cedar Springs, down in the Lake Broadmoor area, up in next to Aspen Point or Diverses. We're up in that area, so close to the bases, kind of down south, close to the Medicaid population, if you will. I hate to stereotype, but we're very centrally located for them, and we stay busy as well. I don't know if quite as busy as you. We don't take walk-ins. I don't know if we can handle that.
Well, the way that we have a lot of students, and the way I'll give you a tour and show you kind of how the nurse practitioners work, and but it's hard. You can't really do counseling by walk-in status.
Yeah, that's tough.
But the fact that you take Medicaid, I appreciate so much. And there'll definitely be some trauma referrals.
Well, we'll take them as much as we can. We have had walk-ins that, funny enough, Diverses Health sends our way. Not so much for like on-the-spot care, but they're really struggling. We'll give them some words of wisdom and some guidance and some safety planning, and we'll schedule appointments, and they see a physical person rather than a phone call, and I think it makes them feel comfortable and safe, and they come.
So you're mostly face-to-face as well?
Most face-to-face. We do have 4 or 5 clinicians that do 100% telehealth, but even a couple of those are starting to do some hybrid, but we're mostly in person. Yeah, mostly in person.
I think, people need that. They need that connection.
We found that when the PHE started to come to an end, and of course after, most of the phone calls were, I want somebody in person. I want somebody in person. I tried this. I didn't like it. There are still some people who found that it worked for them, and we'll do that. We'll provide that to them. We'll take care of them. We'll meet them where they're at. But I prefer in person, and most of my team does as well.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So let's get back to grief and trauma.
Yeah.
Because my story, it's kind of traumatic grief, right? It's not just grief.
Of course.
And you talked about this ART therapy. Remind me of the acronym.
ART, so Accelerated Resolution Therapy.
Okay.
Accelerated Resolution Therapy.
And so it is using eye movements. And so is it a specific identified trauma day, or can it work through events? So for example, my son's life was traumatic, right?
Yeah.
Like from the time
Yeah.
he had his first seizure at 6 to
Sure.
the time he passed at 17, right?
Right.
Like just, lots of multiple micro traumas over a course of 11 years.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes and yes, so both. I think ideally, in my experience, even when you're going through micro traumas, right? One event or some events stand out a little bit more than others. So we're going through life, and every day is a new day, and every day is a kind of a hectic and stressful and traumatic day, but something stands out, and I think the brain holds on to that, the body holds on to that. So the ideal for us as ART-trained clinicians is to identify one of those and find some resolution to that. And the way I like to explain it is, picture yourself on a dinghy, on a little rowboat.
Okay, I love the water.
And you're rowing through this sea of life, right? And then
You mean the hurricane of life?
Right. And sometimes it's very tumultuous and chaotic, and sometimes it's very peaceful, and you get to just drop anchor and stay there, right? So those anchors are these events. And some anchors are big, ginormous anchors that we struggle, but we throw them over. But yet we have to keep rowing through life, right? It's just life. We keep going through life. And then another event happens. That one might be, stressful or whatnot, but it's a little smaller anchor. So we throw that one over, but we keep going.
But it just keeps getting heavier.
And it keeps getting heavier. And at some point, we're not really moving because we're throwing anchors, big, small, medium. We're throwing them overboard. And at some point, we're rowing, but we're not really going anywhere. Now, what I found in accelerated resolution therapy, that some of these anchors are very much tied to one another. And so they kind of magnetize and they start to curl up and they become these big giant things. And that's kind of what I'm referring to, these big compilation of things, of events, of images, of sensations, of symptoms. We'll pull this big old rope and we'll start sawing through that rope. And we saw through what is now one line that came from multiple lines. We'll get rid of those big anchors and we start to feel some freedom. And we get to row again. And at some point we're like, let me get rid of some on this side. And we find a big rolled up, twisted up wad, and we saw through that using some eye movements and the protocol and the scripts that we use, and we loosen again, and now we're freer, and that's usually the response that I get from clients is, I feel lighter. I feel freer. I feel like I can go again. And do they still have anchor lines tossed? Like, we can't get them all, but the ones that are holding you back, that aren't really allowing you to live, to feel joy and love and passion, we try to get at those. So ideally, we'll find those, but if we can't, because we know how the brain works and the natural psychological defenses, right? We put these walls up, and I'm going to give up only what I want to give up because this has taken care of me for so long. So with those patients that don't have an identified kind of main event or compilation of events, we can do a whole life or span of life, doesn't have to be the whole life, but 9 years of it. We'll put them on a subway or some sort of metaphorical kind of vehicle to let them see everything and feel everything, and we'll pull these things out and free them up and allow them to move forward. That's ART in a nutshell.
Yeah. I love that, and being able to kind of put those things together, because most trauma that we see as providers is this complex trauma. It's not one event that ruined someone's life. It's a 10-year relationship or a 10-year abuse in their childhood. It's not like this one little event that we can go back to and erase. Like you said, it's this whole
just twisted up,
yarn,
kind of braided,
anchored,
absolutely.
all, so I love that analogy.
Yeah.
I think it really gives a visual
Yeah.
to, okay, you don't have to go and remember each little trauma,
one little thing
and
at
disconnect. Let's, it's all entangled anyway. Let's cut that main line.
Yeah,
I like that.
I think what people do in addictions, we use it with addictions as well, and the first time use is a very impactful scene. There's a lot of guilt, and with hindsight, right? The 2020 lens of hindsight, they go back to that first scene of very first time they use, and that they regret because they know what it did. Mm-hmm. And so we'll process that out, and we'll find some resolution. One of the steps, and I hope I'm not giving too much away, Lainey, but we call it the director scene. So again, like a dream, anything's possible. We get to change that in our mind, in the neural networks, in the connections of how we recall events. We get to change how we recall it. And I believe that the way I explain it is we have facts and data, right? And then with the facts and data, we humans, we attach emotions and sensations and images even. And that pairing or that grouping is a memory. And so whenever we have good, happy memories, good facts, we pair that with good, happy images and sensations and emotions, and we want to store that in the readily to access file.
Yeah.
And we want to recall these happy events, the first home run in Little League and whatever, right? All these fun, happy things. When I got married, the birth of my child, etc. The not so happy ones with the not so good information and data. We ourselves pair those with images, sensations, and emotions. And the brain, to take care of us, kind of throws it in the wherever it lands file. Mm-hmm. And it's still there, but the wherever it lands file pops up unexpectedly. You're typing your dissertation, and then you get this pop-up window of a memory, like, whoa, yeah. Where's that coming from? And then those images and sensations that we've attached to them, they come flooding back, and they put us in fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do is bring those memories to the ready-to-access file, but it's hard to do because our brain won't allow us, and so we're going to erase and replace some of those negative images and sensations, and the data, the facts remain. We'll never change that, but those emotions and sensations that have handcuffed us to not allow us to live and thrive and feel joy and love, we can kind of replace those with something more pleasant. Mm-hmm. In Gestalt work, we talk about, ask your mom if she wants you to remember her this way, or if she wants you to remember her in a happy time. And so sometimes the brain won't allow that, and that's where the bilateral stimulation and the eye movements come in. And so we have to find that bridge to that gap. And if we can store them here, we can access them. We'll still feel sadness. Mm-hmm. We'll still feel some of those emotions, but not, the word in art that we use is not the ab reactions, those abnormal or intense reactions that have handcuffed us. Mm-hmm. We can still feel sadness and cry even, and that's a beautiful thing. We don't want to get rid of that. Of course, we don't want to get rid of the memories of these things, but just not those handcuffing sensations and images. Let's get rid of that. Let's live better. Art, typically 3 to 5 art sessions will find some good resolution on any event or situation. And then when we do that, something else uncovers, peeling an onion, right? And we'll do some more art there, and we'll do some more art until we down to an acceptable and manageable core. Mm-hmm. We don't want to get rid of the onion because we need onions. Makes our food taste better. But we'll get rid of some of those layers that were unhealthy.
Yeah. So let's just take a moment to talk about this crying thing that we as mental health professionals know is important in everyone's journey, right? Mm-hmm. But it's really not talked about as acceptable. We say it's acceptable, but our behavior in this culture actually says that it's not acceptable, especially for men, especially for people in military. How do we start talking about that in a natural?
Wow, yeah, that's a great point. As am hearing your question there. I mentioned the grief recovery method. I've heard some of your podcasts, and Kubler-Ross, of course, is out there, and it's one of the first things we learn, and even undergrad, right, in the stages. And truth be told, I don't know if Kubler-Ross intended it to be kind of used the way we're using it and people use it, but maybe it was a good start point, and it gave people a visual, something tangible to normalize some things, right? But you and I both know that it's a lot deeper than that. So with the grief recovery method that I incorporate into art therapy, similarly to how EMDR uses their autobiographicals and whatnot in their therapy, the grief recovery method talks about doing a loss history graph. And it's a timeline of loss events, not just, again, the death that brought you into therapy or the grief that's bringing you into therapy, but if you really look at your life, even as that second grader, you start to realize, wow, I've dealt with a lot of loss. And it kind of culminated with this big giant thing that's really impacting me right now, and it's not allowing me to move forward because of whatever's going on. So prior to doing this loss history graph, the grief recovery method talks about, they call them myths and cliches, and then STIRBs, and I'll explain both. The myths and cliches are those things that we hear from loved ones, from people that care about us, from people that don't know what else to tell us because we're in pain. And our culture, in America for sure, but really nation or across the world, and some more than others, but we get in the military, the phrase I like to teach my patients in the military is we use the term suck it up and drive on. Back when I was in, I think nowadays it's more like embrace the suck. Never used that one when I was in, but suck it up and drive on. We don't have time to grieve right now. Yeah, but my battle buddy just suck it up and drive on. Mission first, mission first, mission first. Outside of the military, things like, well, he lived a long life, right? Or your pet died, and we'll go to the pound next week, and we'll get a new puppy. So we'll replace the loss. Or spiritually, God will only give you as much as you can handle.
Yeah.
Right?
I hate that one.
Well, yeah. But people tell us these things, right? And we learn these things, and we hear them, and we suck those tears right on up because we're not allowed to emote. And that's what we learn when we hear these things. We're not, okay, so don't emote. Go grieve by yourself. Time will heal your wounds. Really? Or at least you still have these other kids. Wow, I've heard that.
Yeah.
What are you saying to me right now? What about this child? Like, no, So, but who says these things to us? Again, our priests, our pastors, our coaches, our mentors, our godparents, our therapists sometimes, and so we learn to not deal, not process. That's the term that I use. Deal. Process to me is deal with.
Yeah.
So
feel.
we don't. Yeah.
You got to feel to heal.
You got to feel to heal. I love that. And so we don't, and we got to suck it up and drive on. And then because of that, we turn to, in the grief recovery method, they call them STIRBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors, or really coping skills, right? Some are good coping skills, breathing and meditating and prayer even, but some are not so good coping skills, drugs, drinking, cutting, sex, you name it, right? And so because we don't get acculturated and trained to feel, to heal, we turn to these STIRBs, and we just kind of start masking, and we're filling this vessel of stuff, and we're not dealing with, and eventually it's going to go over, and it's going to make a mess, and we got to clean that mess up.
And then there's something else we got to
process. And then we keep filling, and it's going to make another mess, and we got to clean that one up. And because we don't learn to emote, we're going to keep filling and filling. Down the road, we're going to make another mess, and it's just a series of messes. And so, how do we deal with that, right? Your question to, how do we talk about crying and normalizing that stuff? Is getting them to understand clients to understand what they've heard throughout their lives. Starting from a little kid, the first funeral they went to, their grandma died, and they're a little kid, they don't understand. Oh, but she lived a long life, don't be sad. Well, okay, but I'm sad.
But I'm sad, right?
And so we learn these things, and we just grow up, and then we start to say these things as adults, right?
I know, I've even caught myself, and you just go.
Absolutely. And so teaching them, normalizing that, it's something that's learned, and learning something, we can unlearn it, right? And so identifying, I'm big on it. We have to make things tangible. Show your brain the problem is a saying that we use in art. Show your brain the problem. Let your brain see in written form, just put it on paper, the things that you've heard and seen over the years that have kind of led you to being stuck and with this complicated bereavement stuff, right? Because not everybody has complicated bereavement. Not everybody that goes through trauma has post-traumatic stress disorder. But trauma is trauma and grief is grief. And it could lead to something like that if we don't process, if we don't deal with things. So normalizing things and letting them know that these are things you've heard throughout your life, that the people who most loved you, because they don't know what to do when you're crying, we want to, there you now, it's going to be all right now. And we don't allow people to just kind of sit in that. Even new clinicians, when they teach us in school, right? Let them cry, and silence is great, and then you're in it for the first time, and someone is sobbing, and what do I do? And you start to cross, and we want to fix it, and we go back to it's going to be all right. Versus just letting them emote and push a tissue box and just let them be and ask them how they're feeling and where they're feeling that at. And so that's really the method to the madness, and just normalizing some things for people. They're not crazy. People don't want to go into therapy because that's where crazy people go. You're not crazy.
Or not strong.
Or not strong.
And I think insight makes you strong. This mentality of kind of compartmentalizing and moving through life and oh, I dealt with that. And I think this is what happens specifically in men with PTSD is they have very compartmentalized brains, and they have gone through things, and they have put them in their little box. And then everybody's got a point where, and then once you get to that point, war trauma or whatever, and then you used to have this compartmentalized brain, and now everything is just enmeshed. And,
there's a book out there, Dr. B, similar to Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, which I don't know if I really like that, but it's another book. I think it came out actually here from Focus on the Family. It's called Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Spaghetti.
I have not heard that one, but I can
and so
imagine.
It's similar, but it talks about that maybe stereotypically or biologically speaking, because it could be the other way around, of course, right? But typically men, we compartmentalize, and we're those little boxes on a waffle. And we got to do one thing at a time, because when our wife tells us, well, what about, I'm still working on this first thing. Give me some time. Whereas women have the gift, again, stereotypically or whatnot, biologically speaking, the gift of multitasking, of being able to do multiple things at a time, and that's a blessing, but it could, ultimately also be
exhausting,
right? And this way as well, because we can't even look at this last square down at the bottom of this waffle, because I'm hyper fixated on this first little box. And so we learning about that, right? The biology of how we operate and whatnot. As I'm smiling when you were talking about the compartmentalizing, because I talk about that with my patients. You're a waffle, and you're more like spaghetti when we do couples work and whatnot, and it helps them understand their partner. It helps them understand how we operate. Can we, become a little more spaghetti? We can, absolutely. But our natural gravitas is waffles and kind of spaghetti.
But the spaghetti thing also, getting that organized, because women can be overthinkers, and it's exhausting to be thinking about all of these emotional
connections. Just pull one noodle out and put it on the side, and let's analyze that one noodle, because if you start if it's in the plate and you find the end of one noodle, good luck trying to find the other end of that. And that's what we're talking about. So, but yeah, to find some organization, clear that plate up a little bit. It's okay to be this way. It's a strength. It's a gift. It's amazing, in my opinion. You know, but too much is too much. And so, how do we sort this out? And with us men, right? How do we maybe cut some strips of that waffle so we can accomplish a little bit more at a time, right? Instead of one small thing at a time, and then feeling like we did everything when we did one. So.
Oh, this has been really good. I want to end with, we'll have your contact information in the description so people can find you, and we'll definitely have a referral relationship. But what would you say to audience that, like, they know they have trauma or intense grief, or they know they need this trauma work, but they are just scared to open that box right now, or, you know, like, I'm raising my kids, or I'm, you know, there's just too much going on, but we know that it's just going to accumulate and get, so what would you say to them, like a call to action of, and, you know, not to be scared, or, you know, what would happen in those first?
I think what comes to my mind is, you know, this is a process, that there's no one right way to do this. And so I tell people all the time, my clinicians and students, the hardest step is that first step. And picking up not even coming in, but picking up the phone, or heck, typing a question on that website, you know, contact me bar. What does one do with that as a owner? You know, what do I do when I get a message that says someone has reached out through your website, and thank you for reaching out, call me, you know, what?
Now they got two things they have to.
Well, how difficult was that, you know? And so giving them some peace of mind, letting them know, giving them a quick little message that, you know, the first step is done. The hardest part is over. You reached out by typing or by making the phone call, and then just come on in and get in. I like to tell my clinicians, you know, call ahead, introduce, let them hear your voice, rather than just a picture on a bio or on a page or the words below it. Let them hear your voice, you know, that we're human, and we've gone through things too, and we're here for you. And you don't have to come right on in and say, well, back when I was 5 years old, my uncle this and that. We don't have to do that. Let's get to know, let's talk, let's just come into a safe place, get this ball rolling, and we'll get there when we get there. We'll get there when you're ready. But making that first step, taking that first step, I think is the hardest one. So take that first step, call, type, reach out, and we'll get you going. And again, not crazy. We're just all humans that have gone through different journeys in life, and we need some healing.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
This was great, yes.
All right.